Bismillah ar-Rahman rahim. The question is, what is the role of legislative body in an Islamic state? The answer to that question is very simple. The legislative body in an Islamic state has to act within the limits of the Sharia. If the people who are making the laws are not aware of the limits of the Sharia, they will be crossing the limits without even realizing they have crossed the limits. So it's very important that the lawmakers in an Islamic state are fully well versed in the Sharia, and they have ideological commitment to that. Unfortunately, in countries like Pakistan, where the lawmakers are selected not on the basis of their knowledge of the Sharia, they are selected on the basis of their loyalty to the party bosses and also on the basis of how much money they can bring into the party. So when you have a system like that, where the people who are coming into the process of lawmaking, you're not likely to see uh, an environment where Islam is practiced. So people have to understand that Sharia is a very broad, very vast system of laws, and only people who have been trained, who have spent years and years learning that, are able to do the lawmaking. So this is something for the people to understand, that in an Islamic state, lawmaking is not something that can be done anybody who has the connections or who has the money to get into the parliament. And this is a very serious flaw in the Pakistani system, which is inherited from the British. And of course, the British did not have any ideological commitment to Islam. This was not their purpose. Their purpose was actually to produce a secular system where Islam is not even considered in the process of lawmaking. And unfortunately, after 72 years, Pakistan is still stuck in that British tradition where the lawmaking is done by people who, in most cases, have no ideological commitment to Islam, and if they have it, they do not have enough knowledge of Islam to be engaged in the process of lawmaking. And this is the responsibility of the people in power, if they are committed to Islam, to make sure that this system is changed. If it's not changed, then this tension will go on. Every now and then we hear some law is being made, and then there are a lot of protests, people come out on the streets, and there is turmoil in the country. Why this happens is because the people who are making the laws are not aware of the limits of the Sharia. And this is a flaw in the system, and that has to be corrected. And another thing that has to be corrected is the fact that when the system requires people to pay money to get elected, they pay or loyalty to the party bosses, you cannot root out corruption from that system, from that society. So all the talk about accountability and this is useless, because the whole system, the way it's set up, is inherently corrupt. So when that is corrupt, how can you pick out some individuals and put them in jail and think the corruption will go away? The corruption will keep going on. So this is something that the society, the people have to come to grips with, and they have to do something about it. Otherwise, they will have no one to blame except their own selves. So if the present government is really serious in stopping corruption, they have to look into this. The process, the election process, is inherently corrupt, and it will keep producing corrupt people, people who give huge amount of money to get elected. Obviously, they want returns for that. And when they get into power, they will misuse their power. And this has been going on right from the beginning. And if we think that this is going to be corrected by having an institution like NAB or some other institution that will stop the corruption, then it would be just pure foolishness. This is something that the leaders have, and the media, of course, has a great responsibility. Unfortunately, the media also is not committed to Islam ideologically. And if they are committed, then they do not have enough knowledge of Islam. Based on what interviews and the discussions they have on the mainstream media, it doesn't show that they have any knowledge of Islam. They call people who are not conversant, not well versed in Islam, and the questions and the answers have nothing to do with establishing an Islamic state. So this is the responsibility of the people in power, if they are committed. Because if commitment is not there, then all these things will have no effect on the system. The system which has been inherited by the British, a secular system, is not going to produce an Islamic state. So this is a responsibility of the ulama. The ulama, of course, keep talking about it from time to time, and they keep making speeches about it, but we don't hear too much talk about the inherent corruption, the inherently corrupt system that keeps producing people who are incapable of bringing Islam into the society. So, looking at the prison system as it exists, the educational system, the judicial system, the legislative process, all this is a continuation of the secular British system, which was designed to root out Islam from the society. As has been mentioned in the previous programs, the British went to great lengths to make sure that there was no, Islam was just a private matter to be practiced by people, and it should have no effect on the policies or the running of the government. They were successful in changing the thinking of the people, of the Muslims, that Islam is no more than any other religion, and it should be practiced within the confines of the house and should have no effect and should have nothing to do with the running of the government. And of course, a lot of Muslims fell into that trap, and they started thinking that that's the right way to make progress. And they looked at the example of Europe, that when Christianity was removed from the state, there was a separation of church and state. Europe made progress, and they thought that that would happen in countries like Pakistan. If there's a separation of the mosque and state, then Pakistan will make progress. And of course, that experiment has failed. The mosque has been, the people of religion, or people of knowledge, have been ousted, kept out of the process, and the result has been total disaster for Pakistan. So the experience, the history of Islam is that when Islam has been removed from the public, from the government, it has brought destruction to the society. And this is a very important part of education, which people should consider, that the Islamic history is proof that Islam is the way to be successful. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised success with the practice of Islam. And when Muslims stopped practicing that and made it a private affair like they did in Spain, like they did in India, like they did in Turkey. This was also a problem with the Turkish empire, that religion became unimportant. The sultans, the rulers, started living like the kuffar, and their goals and their commitment to Islam was very weak. They were Muslims only in name, and the result was total disaster. And we see the effects of that until this day. Turkey, which was a superpower, the most powerful state in Europe, became a weak country as a result of secular forces, as a result of secular indoctrination. And till this day, it has not recovered from that. So Pakistanis can learn lessons from these experiments of these nations, or countries, or empires in the Islamic world that turned to secularism, left Islam, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala humiliated them. So if Muslims in Pakistan and elsewhere want to make progress, they will have to go to the roots. They will have to look at the example of the early Muslims who were committed to Islam, who practiced Islam, and had a system which was given by Islam. So the lawmakers in Pakistan, for example, today are not qualified to be sitting in those places. Most of them are not even practicing the very fundamentals of Islam. So how these people get elected, of course, is a big question that people have to consider. This process that brings these people into the parliament, into the legislative body to make laws needs to be reviewed. This needs to be looked at. And also the people who are making the educational policy, people who are responsible for the education of the future generations. So unless this indoctrination, or this system that was introduced by the British to change the thinking of the Muslims, unless this is changed, Pakistan is not going to make progress. No matter how many billions of loans are given and they take, nothing will happen. And it'll take hundreds and hundreds of years to come out of the mess. So the whole system has to be looked at from that point of view. Unfortunately, the people who are in power are not knowledgeable enough to even look at this critically and see what is wrong. They're thinking the problem is in the corruption of the people, that they come and loot the treasury. And this is, of course, still continuing, because the people in power came to power as a result of the same corrupt system. And they will be doing the same thing which their predecessors have been doing. They spent money to get into power. They had influence to get into power. And now they want returns. And when they get returns, that will lead to corruption. And the process will keep on repeating. So the system that is there is not right. And the parliament in Muslim countries is not supreme. It is subservient to the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is another secular concept. The power belongs to the people. The people are sovereign. This is a secular idea. The people are not sovereign. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is sovereign. All power comes from Allah. In this type of thinking, this type of vote of a genius is equal to the vote of an idiot. This kind of system, and most societies, in most places, most people are not very smart. They have no way of knowing who is the right person to be elected. They are swayed by the media, they are influenced by the media. And in Islamic environment, this kind of system does not work. In a secular environment, in a society where uh, it doesn't matter whether you are within the Sharia or you are outside Sharia. It doesn't matter whether you are obeying the laws of Allah or you're not obeying the laws. Now, is this kind of thing can work there? But in an Islamic environment, this kind of thing is not going to work. A person who gets elected, he doesn't understand what is right and wrong as far as the laws of Allah is concerned. What can you expect from such a person? He's not going to be making laws that are consistent with the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know, this has been discussed before, that when the transgression, when the laws of Allah are disobeyed, it brings consequences. It brings results. Just to give an example, Pakistan has been independent for 72 years, but still the economic system is still based on riba, which is such a serious sin, which is one of the major sins. And that is still the basis of the economy. And the reason is because people in power think it's not possible to have a system without that. So when the people who are making laws, who are making decisions, have that kind of thinking, how do you expect success to come? When a person is fighting a war against Allah, is fighting a war against his Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how can he expect to win that war? He's not going to win. So this kind of thinking will bring more problems. And of course, the ulama don't have any power. They don't have any say in the matter. They make a lot of noise, they make a lot of speeches, but nobody pays any attention to that. And the common man has to understand that his condition is not going to improve. Is not going to improve. He should not expect miracles that suddenly something will happen. If the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are being violated, nothing is going to happen in Muslim countries. The kuffar, the non-believers, they will make success. They will have their progress if this is what its progress is. But in Muslim countries, this is not going to happen. And we've seen the example of Turkey, which was at one time a great power. And it fell from that, and it's just one of the many countries in the world. Actually, to the point that even a country like Pakistan, a new country like Pakistan, has nuclear weapons, where a country like Turkey, which has been an empire for hundreds of years, they're still not at that point. So what kind of success is that? See, from any standpoint, we cannot point to any of these countries. Like India was a big Muslim empire one time, and now the Muslims are treated like third-class citizens. So how did this happen? It happened because Muslims left Islam and turned to secularism. Their commitment to Islam was weak, and the result was they brought destruction upon themselves. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned this so many times in the Quran, and He's given examples of nations. And Muslims, especially the lawmakers, should know. It should be essential for lawmakers that they are very highly knowledgeable in Islam. And if they are not, they should not be qualified to sit in the parliament. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give the leaders in the ummah the understanding of what are the basic fundamental requirements of Islam. Wa akhir dawana and alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.